but give us just a couple of moments and we'll get started this afternoon. Thanks again for those of you who have just joined us. We're giving just a couple more minutes for Historic Albina Advisory Board members to join us in this space. I got a couple of messages just shortly a little bit ago from members who are running just a bit behind. So if you'll give us just a couple moments, we'll get started shortly. Thanks again for those of you who are patiently awaiting the start of our HAAB meeting today. I want to be a good steward of our time. I realize there are a few conflicts this evening. As you know, in a small community like this, several of our stakeholders are called upon in a number of different projects to lend to what is going on in the Albina corridor and all of the reinvestments here. There is another very important meeting with the formerly known as the North-Northeast CDI. We'll be meeting here shortly. So we have a number of folks who will be jumping off the Action Plan Leadership Committee through Prosper. So I know some of our HAAB members will be joining that meeting. A couple of others are running behind in a number of other community investment project meetings. With that in mind, I may just get us going. We can get started, and hopefully those folks will jump in with us soon. Again, I'm Erica Warren with Tri-Excellence, and I have the pleasure of helping us facilitate this conversation with the community and I-5 Rose Quarter Project. We're embarking on something very special and wanting to do something different. From those in the community who are joining us, thank you. Your voice is very important to us. We would ask for you to avail yourself to the number there on the screen. There will be an opportunity for public comment here shortly. So we'll be ask you to be ready to dial the number if you've prepared a public comment for us. And then keep in mind, there are other ways for you to engage with the project. There are email addresses, and you could also call and leave a message as well. If you would go to the next slide for me, I would appreciate it. As I mentioned earlier, we have a very packed and informative meeting. As always, we'll have an opportunity for public comment, and then we will have some project updates. We will hear from members from the CMGC in regards to the diversity plan. And then we'll also spend some time talking about performance measures and outcomes as we have done. And we will plan to approve our charter and then have an exciting design update for you this evening. Next slide, please. You all are familiar with this. Again, your voice matters. HAAB members don't have any issues with this. We want to make sure that you feel safe. There's an authentic space and opportunity for you to voice your thoughts and concerns, your passion towards this community. We appreciate you always speaking your truth and listening for understanding. And in a passionate environment, often we have some what seem like or could be clashes, but we understand that everyone is coming from a different vantage point. We all have different grids that we are working through. So we ask you to deal with issues and not people. Sometimes we're going to experience discomfort, but I am confident that this group is all pushing towards and working towards a unified goal of empowering, uplifting, and investment in this Albina corridor. We ask you to remain respectfully engaged and to expect and accept that we can't solve everything tonight, but we appreciate your continued investment, your continued support of this process, and being willing to be here with us. Next slide, please. At this time, Ms. Natalie, I believe, is going to help us with our public comment.
Yes, thanks, Erica. I am just going to share this slide for a moment. The phone number to dial in if you would like to make a live public comment is on the screen here, as well as the meeting ID and passcode you will need to enter. We today have 2 minutes for our time limit for speakers to make a live comment. I have a timer I will share. I do see that we already have one commenter in the waiting room, so I will go ahead and admit them, stop sharing, and get our timer up on the screen. Okay, so hopefully the timer is now showing. And we had a commenter by the name Diane. If you'd like to make your comment, please unmute yourself. And you can do that by dialing *6.
Sorry, I gave testimony last week. I was just listening today.
Oh, okay.
And I've been trying to get into the meeting for like 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Let's see. So we, yeah, thank you. Apologies for the confusion there. Okay, I do not see any other public commenters at this time, Erica. We can give it a few more moments if we'd like to. Again, the phone number is 971-247-1195 and meeting ID 893-8304-3856 and passcode 124184. And I'm still not seeing any public comments at this time.
All right, well, thank you, Ms. Natalie. At this time, we are going to transition into our project updates. And I believe I will be turning it over to Ms. Monica Blanchard.
Thanks, Natalie. If you want to go to the next slide. Yes, so thanks, Erica. Megan's on vacation this week, so I'm going to cover a couple updates this afternoon. First off, as Erica mentioned in an email to you earlier this week, the project website was taken offline because the site's host server was compromised. So we have an interim page up on the ODOT website, and we're diligently working on a solution for getting the website back up and running. As always, we're making sure that the board, as well as other public community members, have access to the information. There was quite a library on the website. And please contact us with any comments or questions about the project through Erica or others while we work on getting the website back up and running. Second, we want to continue to keep you appraised of the letter of agreement that's being developed at the governor's office. I don't have any major updates today. This is still currently with the City of Portland and partners for review. We are still tracking it closely, and we'll share news with you as soon as we have it, as soon as possible. So next, well, the Federal Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act was signed in November, which is huge. We're still waiting on the passage of the Federal Reconciliation Bill, which is a key piece to our puzzle. And this is one of the funding sources that we are considering in the conceptual finance plan that we worked hard to develop for the Oregon Transportation Commission's request by December 1st. So the plan includes refined cost estimates and as well as the federal, state, and local funding sources that'll provide the financing needed to cover the full cost of the project. But due to the shift in the timing at the federal level, the Oregon Transportation Commission decided to delay the delivery of the finance plan to from December 1st out to January 13th in order to accommodate the timing of the reconciliation bill. So we are on track to meet this revised deadline, and we will be providing an update to the commission at their January 20th meeting. And just a reminder, the finance plan is something we'll bring back to the board here as an informational item, and we plan to do that in early 2022. And then my last update for today is related to our discussion around the mobility focus and climate and health performance measures. And we heard your feedback and desire to focus on community health in our metrics. So we're working on updating those based on your feedback, and working with TriMet to get some more information around transit use in the area and refining those measures. And that's all I have today, and I'm going to turn it over to Tia for some other updates.
Thanks, Monica. Natalie, if you go to the next slide, that'd be great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Tia Williams. I am the Communications Director for the Urban Mobility Office. It's great to be back with you here this afternoon. So wanted to give you an overview of what we have planned for community engagement in 2022. And then at the end, we'd love to get some of your feedback, comments, suggestions, and any feedback would be much appreciated. So for 2022, we're hoping to get more in the community, specifically through hosting lunch and learns, both focused at the business community, but also civic conversations, focusing in on some of the opportunities that this project presents, having some panels featured at those lunch and learns. We're also out doing community briefings with neighborhood associations and other interest groups and coalitions. We will also be putting forward a community engagement compensation framework, which is really a way for us to contract directly with community-based organizations to have them help us with engagement we know that that's a huge part of, their ability to be able to help us engage is making sure that there's compensation for that work. And so we'll be putting together that framework and would love to keep you all in the loop as that gets further along. We'll also be at different events in the community, really supporting through sponsorships with different community organizations, showing our support for the events that they have going on. We'll be out there tabling with information on the project, just making sure that we're able to get our information out there and raise the level of understanding of what this project is, the benefit of it, and really the reason why we're needing this project. And then lastly is making sure that at the state level and local level, we're continuing to engage elected officials as we move forward on the hybrid 3 option, especially with the finance plan, the diversity plan, and some of these other big plans. It's a great time to get back out and keep folks updated on the project and our progress. So if you have any feedback, questions, suggestions for us, we'd love to hear those. You can either we can open it up for feedback now, or you can always hand those to Erica and she'll make sure to get those to our team. So thank you all. Erica, am I turning it back to you?
Indeed, you can. Thank you. Wondered if any of our HAAB members have any questions for Monica or for Tia in regards to the update or the community engagement strategy and plans coming up. I'm trying to scale through to see if I see any hands. I do see Srinivasa.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Great. I just wanted to, first, I appreciate that ODOT has heard our request to have the performance measures around the climate aspects, but I also wanted to ask about the community engagement piece, because I was noticing on the performance measures, there is one of the ways that it's being measured is by the number of touch points with the community. And what I'm hoping, or what I'd like to see, is the quality and the depth of what that engagement looks like. And so I'm wondering how are we going to track? I say we, but I don't actually mean include myself. You all know what I mean. But how are we going to track the quality of an engagement? Is it just people showing up, or is it the level of information? Is it input in decision making? And how do we know that ODOT is actually taking the information that's being shared by community at these events and integrating it into informing the project design? So that's what I'd like to see incorporated into the performance measures. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just respond to that because I think it's a really good point. And one of the things that our public involvement team is really aware of is the kind of level of engagement and what's being asked of the community at that point in time. And so there's times where there might just be like an informational update. There's other times where it's direct feedback because there's an upcoming decision. And so that's something that we can work with Monica and Megan to have reflected in the performance measures, just so that we can sort of track what type of engagement it is and how it's influencing decisions. Is it just a general informational update? So it is something that we kind of track internally, but we'll make sure that that kind of gets reflected in the performance updates so that you all are seeing those as well.
Thanks, Tia. Are there any other questions from HAAB members in regards to anything that Tia or Monica just shared? If not, we can move forward into hearing from our CMGC. I would love to ask Jeff Moreland if he's ready to share. Thanks, Jeff, for joining us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you all and be in front of you again, talking about this project, this wonderful opportunity we have in front of us today. So let's talk about, next slide, please. Let's go into the diversity plan and kind of give you guys an update on where we are today. So We started this out a while back, and we went through the diversity plan subpart A and subpart B. And those actually helped inform us to get to where we are today. And we used our green sheet analysis tool to do the assessment on how we were going to be able to achieve the results and gain the results. It's the science behind everything that we do when we go in and we do an estimate for the project, and then we go in and look at current capacity and looking for new capacity ways. That's the assessment that we did. And Bill's going to go in a little more detail about some of that. And so now we're at a phase where the actual diversity plan has actually been submitted to ODOT, but we are still going through incorporating, or at least going through how we incorporated the community input that we got from the COAC. And so we spent last November going through half of the input that we incorporated into the diversity plan. And we're going to spend December going through the second half of that. Next slide, please. So the overview of the community input that was actually included, we actually stated what the COAC asked. We showed them specifically the answer, and then told them specifically where the answer is in the diversity plan, so that they can track that. So we went through all the comments that they gave us and showed them that we answered them in the diversity plan. And the areas were the diversity plan comments, transparency and accountability, wealth creation, cultural inclusion, preservation and consciousness, workforce and anti-harassment. Next slide, please. And then part two of that input that we're going through in the month of December is outreach and engagement, capacity building, technical assistance, community relations, and communications and messaging. So we'll be going through how we incorporated their comments in those areas in the month of December. So what you guys really want to get down to and kind of give you an update on kind of, next slide, please, where we are with the assessment of where we are. And so I'm going to turn it over to Bill to talk a little bit more about how we got to the numbers that we got to.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Good evening, everybody. I'm Bill Bruce. I'm part of the joint venture team. Yeah, so the next 9 slides are going to be a report out on DBE contracting and workforce diversity. About half the slides are related to the original 20% design package, and the other half of the slides are prorated values to project what the hybrid 3 option would do to the project. So at a summary level, looking at purely at contracting and subcontracting, this first slide shows that out of the original 20% design, which was roughly a $600 million project, the total amount of subcontracted work would be 46% based on the scope of work, or $260 million. Of that $260 million, 13% of it would be DBE, first tier DBE contracting. This would be your traditional first tier DBEs, 73 million. We have a mini prime program on this job, and we forecasted that approximately 10% or $58 million of that 260 million would go out to mini primes. And those two lines together total approximately 23% or 131 million. We also, on a project like this, and as a standard course of business, really look for areas where we can expand DBEs into new scopes of work, and we call that DBE capacity building. And for the scope of work on this project, we estimated the value of about 5% or 29 million. So when you add all 3 of those components together for the original design concept, you come up with approximately 160 million or roughly 28% DBE contracting value. Next slide, please. So what this slide does is it basically changes the numbers to scale the project up to the hybrid 3, or what we call in the enlarged scope here. Same percentages, and you can see that it results in obviously increased dollars. 437 million in total subcontracting, 124 million in DBE first tier contracting, 95 million in the mini prime category, and then 48 million in the capacity building, a total of what we predict to be $267 million in DBE participation. Next slide, please. So from there, what we want to do is typically we want to take the assessment to the workforce, and we want to see how those dollars trickle into jobs by craft. So again, taking the original 20% estimate, the $600 million project, equated to approximately 1.4 million people hours, broken down by craft between carpenters, finishers, ironworkers. You can see the breakdown. To the right, you see the approximate value in both wages and fringe benefit contributions, approximately 99 million. And again, when we do this assessment, this is based specifically on this scope of work. So carpenter hours at 280,000 hours, concrete finishers, 46,000 hours. These numbers are actually projected based on the scope of work that's in this design. So next slide, we'll take these same hours into the enlarged scope, the hybrid 3 scope. The 1.4 million people hours turns into 2.1 million craft hours, value of approximately $148 million in wages and benefits, again, broken down by the main crafts that we see participating in this work. Next slide, please. So the next step is to take who we think the likely participants are and apply their existing workforces into the mix to try to get at what we call projected hiring needs. So in other words, the participants, the contractors that we know are likely to work on this project come to this project with existing workforces, and those existing workforces have a diversity profile already. So we take that diversity profile, we combine it with the projected hiring needs of which we can apply a goal to, and we ultimately use this to predict what our outcomes are in order for us to focus our efforts in specific areas to achieve specific results. So for the 20% design, we predict that the HSJV would self-perform approximately 37% of the craft hours. For this scenario, we assumed that Raymore Construction would perform approximately 19% of the craft hours. The mini primes would also perform another 19%. And then other first tier DB subs would perform 10%, and other non-DB subs local to Portland and from abroad would perform approximately 15%. And the next slide will turn those percentages into hours, again, for the 20% design, the original design. So those percentages then transform. This is the 1.4 million man hours broken down by those percentages. Then the next slide should break those same hours down for the enlarged scope. So now if we go to the next slide, we'll be able to based on those participants who we know those participants very well because we work here. And we know most of them, and we're pretty intimate with the capacity building scopes as well, and what we would likely see in those areas. So what that allows us to do is it allows us to know what those participants' existing workforces look like. And for each one, it's a little different. It's not just as simple as applying a percentage. So it's a much larger assessment to analyze them individually. But when we do so, again, on the 1.4 million people hours for the original scope, we come up with an existing workforce of 800,000 craft hours that would come to the project, leaving a remainder of 600,000 hours to hire, or what we call the gap or the projected hiring needs for the project. It's been our goal to take that gap and hire on a one-to-one basis. So that's how we get to really looking at where we'll land with diversity. But within that existing 800,000 hours, we think there's existing BIPOC of 250,000 hours. And within the projected 600,000 hours of hiring on a one-to-one basis, we think we would get another 300,000 BIPOC hours. Next slide, please. If we take those same numbers and we enlarge the scope, we come up with 1.2 million craft hours for existing workforce coming to the project. We come up with 900,000 hours for the gap or the new workforce. Existing BIPOC coming from the firms that we think will be on the project would be 375,000 hours. And then on a one-to-one hiring basis, new BIPOC would be 450,000 hours. Next slide, please. So Jeff, I'll let you summarize in these next two slides.
So this is the summary of this to get an idea on where we are right now. If you compare this in terms of subcontracted out, you look at there's $73 million to total DBE, including another 10% to 116 million to the mini CMGCs. And that equates to essentially at the end of the day, you're looking at 23% or $219 million of work subcontracted out to minority firms. And that's significant. So I want you guys to really look at that number. You're talking 219 million on the large scope. You're talking 131 million on the existing scope, right? And that includes a $29 million in capacity building and a $48 million in capacity building in the enlarged scope. This is work that DBEs historically have not done that we're going to grow and help them get in that area. So the total potential participation is $267 million on the enlarged scope or $160 million on the existing scope. And that is transformative to a community. That level of resources to our community will be transformative. So can we go to the next sheet and equate this to workforce hours? So now let's talk about the same thing for the workforce hours. You have essentially under the existing workforce that we have on the, you look at it, $87 million under the large scope compared to and $57 million under the existing scope of dollars that are going to the existing workforce, right? Of that, the BIPOC community, you're looking at an existing workforce of $18 million going to that. That's in wages and benefits versus 27 if we go to the enlarged scope. And as far as new BIPOC, you're looking at $21 million under the existing scope and 32 million going to them in wages and benefits under the expanded scope. So that's essentially equates to 39 million for the BIPOC community in wages and benefits to our people in the albino community. And in a large scope, you're essentially looking at 59 million. So I just want to turn it over now back to you, Erica, for any questions. I know that was a lot to go through, but any questions and you guys have about that, please.
Bill and Jeff, thank you so much. That's really exciting information. I have a couple of hands. Mr. Edwards, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you for the presentation. I apologize, I didn't catch all of it. But I know early on we had talked about Raymore and their participation in this. And I had the understanding that Raymore was coming in as a general. If I'm wrong in that, then please correct me. And in Raymore coming in as a general, we wanted to make sure that there were other minority firms that were going to get a piece of this. So in other words, if you pull Raymore out, not that we're pulling them out of the project, but if you pull their numbers out, what does it look like for diversity for the rest of the subcontractors that are going to be coming in on this project?
Okay, that's a good question. So essentially, go back to the, if somebody can go back to the slides and we can look at it. Well, I can pull them up right here. Just give me a second. So if you pull Raymore's projected hours out and projected percentages out, where if we did nothing on the project.
I'm not saying that you don't do anything, Jeff. I'm just saying.
I got it. I'm helping.
Okay.
I'm just answering your question. It's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
It's we're looking at, you're still going to have, in terms of the BIPOC community, 400,000 craft hours without Raymore. So Raymore will do 250, but you're still going to have 400,000 craft hours without Raymore's numbers being in there. That's in the large scope. It's essentially 600,000.
Okay. Is that the correct slide?
This is for the enlarged scope. This is not the one the one before this is the one we need, right? So
Okay, there we go.
So if you're looking at this on the existing scope, if you pull the Raymore hours out, you still have the mini CMGCs at 250,000 craft hours. You have the other DBEs at 150,000 craft hours. And so you're still looking at 400,000 craft hours, even if you pull out Raymore.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to add just one point to that, not a caution, but just more of an exclamation point is you could obviously dial Raymore down or up, but from a person trying to design an end result, Raymore brings a workforce, an existing workforce. When you do the existing workforce calculation, Raymore brings an existing workforce that's over 50% people of color and women. And the workforce of the other mini primes and DV subs on average bring an existing workforce of less than 30%. So that's the balancing act that the project has to walk is to get the right amount of Raymore to meet their overall goals at the end of the day.
Right. I don't want you to misunderstand me. I'm not trying to pull Raymore out.
No,
we know Raymore. We want more Raymores. That's what we want. And the only way we're going to get more Raymores is if they have a bigger piece of that pie going in. And so that's what we're after. We want 20 Raymores.
Exactly.
Okay. And so the only way we're going to get 20 Raymores is when we not pull Jeff's numbers out and pull Jeff out of the project. That's not the intent at all. The intent is, though, to create more Raymores, more minority contractors that can go out here and do work, do these large projects, and employ more people of color and more BIPOC people. That's what we're after.
I agree 100%. Just understand that the capacity building, all the things we're doing, it takes a while. Raymore is a 20-something year company. It's taken us a while to get here.
Yes, I get that.
We have to build our companies as they go, and that takes time. That's what the capacity building, that's what all the technical assistance and all the hands-on training and help we're going to give on this project is to help develop that. But it will take some time for those companies to have the capacity necessary to compete at a level when they've been historically locked out for such a long time. And some of these businesses are less than 10 years old. A lot of the businesses that are over 10 years old, a lot of those businesses will be in the mini prime program, which means they will be taking on large chunks of work. But we have many of our DBE firms you're talking about that are doing less than $1 million worth of work. So it takes a while. You just don't get there overnight. But I do hear your point, and I agree with that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Pranavas, I saw your hand earlier, and then I'll go to you, Amber.
Yeah, it's just a quick comment about how data is presented. I think in this information just shared and the others, I would really like to see us move away from BIPOC and using the term BIPOC community. There is a Black community, there is an Indigenous community, there are people of color. And so I think especially when we're looking at numbers and where money is going into a certain community, we need to look at this disaggregated. So I would love for us moving forward to see the information disaggregated, and especially if this project has a restorative justice focus on the Black community. At a minimum, I'd like to see that community called out every single time we see numbers and information, so I can be able to see it not in with, kind of combined with everything else, but be able to pinpoint it exactly. So I really appreciate the information. Thank you very much, Jeff. And Bill, but that would be really helpful for me moving forward.
Thank you for that. That's fire. You're absolutely correct. And we will start working on making sure we disaggregate those numbers out. Thank you.
Amber.
Yeah, so Keith, I think your excellent points. So Jeff, I was thinking maybe you might provide Keith, as well as some of the other HAAB members, some of the work that Terrence will be leading as it relates to the workforce pipeline building and the support he's going to be providing other DBEs to achieve some of the very things that Keith is talking about.
So we are actually, in terms of in getting workforce moving now, we've actually going to hire for this project, which is actually working now, a workforce advocate. And their whole responsibility is to go out and inform the community of the opportunities for employment on this project. And we're actually have leveraged our relationships with several of the other prime contractors in the Portland metropolitan area. We've already placed a lot of people on projects, other projects, and start, so he follows up with them, tracks them, making sure they're having success. He is a liaison between them and the prime contractor, but he's actually placing people now to actually move this forward, because we realize it's going to be hard enough to achieve this goal. We have to get started now. Even with all the delays, we're starting with the workforce now.
Thank you so much. Are there other questions for Bill or for Jeff? Seeing none, you guys, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. I am very impressed. Thank you for your passion for this community, and we appreciate you coming to share with us. Look forward to see how this continues to affect our community positively.
Thank you all. Have a good
Thank you so much. Ms. Natalie, if you would share the slides. Ms. Monica, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a little bit of facilitator liberty here. I know that I have some of our members who participate in the Action Plan Leadership Committee and may be leaving us shortly. And I know that we were planning to take a vote this evening. And so, Natalie, if you could move for me into the slides, and we're going to come back to the performance measures. I see Mr. Modica has just joined us. Awesome. Next slide, please. So I just want to refresh us in regards to the charter and purpose of this committee. You guys have received that in your packets and emails from me in the past. So recommendations in regards to minimization of impacts, helping this team to adopt performance metrics, to really give your authentic input, advising us how to engage the community, how we connect with other efforts in the Albina corridor and other reinvestments in the historic Black Albina community, that you all would be very instrumental in helping us design this project in a way that's responsive to the community's needs, and that the ODOT team, the I-5 Rose Quarter team, is committed to making sure that they keep you updated, that they are transparent in their decision-making and their processes regarding other governance and programming in regards to funding and financing and design and construction schedule. Next slide, please. I wanted to see if anyone had any questions in regards to the charter before we move forward. I believe we've had several discussions and you all have had them for a while, but since I know I'm going to be losing some of our community members, I wanted to make sure we could move forward here. So I'll open the floor if there are any additional comments or questions in regards to the HAAB charter.
Could you put that previous slide back up?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thoughts or questions?
I think it touches on most of the concerns that I think we have, but I get sometimes anxious about the decision-making process. And I don't want to be informed of decisions that have already been made prior to getting input from the community.
Completely understood, Mr. Edwards. Thank you. Ms. Natalie, if you could move to the next slide. In keeping with our process, we did formally adopt our charter. And so I would like to have us formally adopt the revisions to the charter that you all received. I wondered if there is a board member who would be willing to make a motion.
I can make the motion. This is Srinivasa, and I make the motion to approve the charter as shown in the previous slide with the language presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right. Well, it has been moved and seconded that we approve the revisions to the charter as stated. You all have received them in your email. At this time, let's take a formal vote of Historic Albina Advisory members. Those who are in the virtual space, I'm going to call on you for your yay, because I think it's a little difficult for those who might be listening to see all of the kind of voting emojis, et cetera. So, Mr. John Washington.
Yay.
Thank you. Mr. Keith Edwards.
Yay.
Mr. Kevin Modica.
Aye.
Good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Bryson Davis, Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Thank you. Miss Leslie Goodlow.
Aye.
Thank you. Dr. Ebony Amato. I know I saw her in the chat. I wonder if she had difficulty. I'll come back to her. Dr. Carlos Richard.
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Miss Srinivasa.
Aye.
And did we get Dr. Ebony Amato back in the room? I know she was in the chat. Well, based on those in the room, you all have unanimously voted to move forward with our charter. Please know that we value your input, and the project team is always looking and willing for us to be holding them accountable and to making pivots where necessary. So thank you for that. Miss Natalie, if you would go back to the slides for me, we can jump in. at this very, very important performance measure. Need to go back just a little bit, Miss Natalie, in the slides. Thank you. Awesome. Miss Monica, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Erica, and good evening, HAAB. I'm excited to be back here tonight to continue our discussion around performance measures, especially this topic that's so important around community input. I know I mentioned this last time, but I want to reiterate that one of the aspects of the board's purpose, as you just adopted in your charter, is to adopt performance measures that will allow us to track and demonstrate the project's success in meeting the desired outcomes that are defined by our values. And so I just want to reiterate and be clear that the measures that we brought to you today are truly proposed. We have put a lot of thought into these and what they could be, but we want to hear what your feedback is and what you think success on the project looks like to you. And Srinivasa, your feedback earlier is exactly what we're looking for to help improve these measures as we move into adopting them. So this slide, for those that weren't able to join us last month, I just wanted to reiterate that a performance measure is something that can be measured, it's implementable and has a definable goal. They indicate the effectiveness of our current processes and determine what success looks like on the project. The project is still early in design with opportunities to continue to change course to ensure the project is driven by these project values. But at the same time, the progression of the team's work related to early work packages, the diversity plan that you heard from the CMGC contractor tonight means that this is a prime moment to really start implementing the procedures and beginning to track and report and evaluate our project success. So next slide, Natalie. So again, in total, the draft list for discussion includes 27 measures. We have 18 quantitative measures that I'll be measuring in numbers and 19 qualitative measures that we propose measuring by different actions. And we continue to plan to make refinements to reflect your feedback on the restorative value definition. And we'll bring those measures forward in an upcoming meeting. And tonight we will discuss the community input measures. So next slide, Natalie. So each measure really boils down to a central theme, which I'll be highlighting in the next couple slides. You can find the full list of measures, including the specific metrics in the packet that Erica sent to you last week, if you'd like to compare and kind of follow along with the summary level that's on the slides. So I want to really start with the acknowledgement that reflecting the feedback and the needs of the local albina community is one of our core values and purposes of Rose Quarter. With these performance measures, we want to focus in on how the project can engage with and integrate feedback from the community and stakeholders in a way that's welcoming to the historic albina community. You heard about the wonderful work that the CMGC is engaging in, and you'll hear more later this evening about the additional opportunities through Camp ELSO. These are just examples of how we will be looking at and implementing our engagement approach towards demonstrating success around these measures. And I think there's a lot of other opportunities that we'll be looking for as well. So for the community input value, the draft list of measures to track and report progress numerically, so our quantitative measures involve changes made to the project in response to advisory committee input, so your input as well as COAC's input, community-based organizations and stakeholders' meaningful meaningfully participating in the process, feedback applied to inform the project towards supporting desired outcomes, and clear communication around ongoing opportunities for providing input. So those are the quantitative measures. So next onto the qualitative list. So for community input, the draft list of measures seeks to track and report, again, through strategies and actions and elements in a qualitative way, around clear communication, around ongoing opportunities for providing input, opportunities for developing new and emerging young community leaders, and educating ODOT staff and project team in the larger region about the past harms and systemic impacts of highway construction to the Albina community. So next slide. So we'll continue to work through the measures and goal setting this winter, and we'll also be engaging in similar discussions with the COAC in early 2022. Following these discussions, the team will go back and revise the measures, bring those back to you for additional feedback, and see how we reflected your input and make sure that's what was intended. One thing I'm sure that you noticed is that we haven't yet put actual numbers or percentages. So we'll be, after getting your initial feedback and revising the measures, we'll also be start talking about goal setting and next steps. First, we wanted to bring the initial list to you and see what resonates with you before we start putting those numbers. So that is the next step. Next, Natalie, on implementation. So just another reminder, I showed this slide last time as well, that as we go through these metrics, the team is also already starting to think through our implementation plan that will be used internally to set up all the necessary procedures to track and report on the measures. And then last slide here, the last slide, we're also planning on reporting our progress in the meetings on performance measures to the board, as well as the public on a quarterly basis. This is just an example report layout of how we plan to report on our progress. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Erica to facilitate a discussion, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Indeed. Thanks, Monica, for that. I want to remind you all what an important role that you play here in making sure that we are holding this project accountable to the values that have been set. And so, Srinivasa, like some of the comments that you made earlier, I want to make sure that we're not missing anything, that we are utilizing this excellent collective brain trust in this room to make sure that the project team has all of the information that they need to make sure that they can follow through and that they are really meeting the needs of this community. So I want to open up the conversation. Did the team miss anything? Are those things resonating with you? Are there measures on the list that are more or less important? Or are there suggestions that you might have in improving the measures that are on the list? I'm trying to see. Ms. Srinivasa, I see your hand up.
Yes, okay. Can you go back to the second to last slide, please? Okay, so my, okay, so I have a couple questions / comments. I'm thinking about, and I'm wrestling with these words, informed and involved. So I just took a minute to Google it to make sure I have a clear sense before I speak on it, because I think this is where the nuance of the language we use in performance measures really matters. And to me, when I see the word informed, that means I have awareness and information, but it doesn't necessarily track to having a impact on the decision making. And so what I'm wondering is how are we going to measure input received, that means information from community, so y'all are informed, versus information that has been integrated as a performance measure in a quantitative and qualitative way. So what I'd like to see is have you all come back to us and talk more about the process and plan for integrating information that community has shared, or input that the community has shared into decision-making. The other thing that I noticed on this particular slide, it says documentation of major decision-making impacts. And so that to me definitely needs some qualifiers around it. Decision-making impacts, how are we going to measure that? And how is meaningful participation, which was mentioned on another slide, how is that going to be quantified? So I don't have answers for all of this. I would love, if there's conversations that will happen offline around these measures, I'd love to be engaged in those, because I think this will really help us see, because in my mind, when I look at these, I'm already thinking of things and I'm like, well, is that an informed way, or is this integrated? Is this going to have an impact? So my thoughts are a little bit raggedy, but that's okay. But that's where I'm thinking right now, is just how are we going to quantify meaningful participation for community engagement?
Thank you, Srinivasa. I think those are great comments, and I think we have started looking at that, and we can definitely bring some more info back. I think we have a lot to learn from the CMGC's work as well with the COAC, and kind of how they documented what was heard and where it was implemented into the plan, and can we expand upon that for the larger project? These are all great points. So I think we've got some work started, and we can definitely bring back for more input and discussion around that.
And one last thought too is I think one of the other measures, it's on a previous slide, mentioned educating ODOT staff, and where is it? There, educate ODOT staff project team in the larger region about past harms and their systemic impacts. So I'm wondering how, in terms of a qualitative measure, beyond education, how is this leading to action? And how are we going to measure future action differently than past action based on the education that ODOT staff members receive?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think we have some more work around that, and we can do some brainstorming, bring some ideas, and get more input from you on what we come up with.
Great, very thoughtful questions, Srinivasa. I appreciate it. Dr. Richard, I see your hand.
Thank you so much. My question, I think what Srinivasa is getting at, she can correct me if I'm wrong, is with this, how do we implement a true equity and empowerment lens focus on this? And I would suggest that process, that focus, be spelled out very clearly early on in the process, because when the part of the equity and empowerment lens that I'm focusing on right now is the process that deals with people and how people were impacted, how people are impacted, and then how people will be impacted. And so I think that, while we have the information in front of us with some definitions, concepts, and terms that really have yet to be defined, I think juxtaposed to that should be the equity and empowerment lens to make sure and make for certain that we get this thing right from the beginning. So I would strongly encourage that as we continue on in this process and continue on in this journey, because I think it gets to what Ms. Erica was talking about, so that we don't miss anything, or we don't leave anything behind, or leave anything undone, or after it's finished, come back and say we should have done this. Thank you so much. I yield back to Ms. Erica.
Thank you, Dr. Richard. I appreciate your comments. Mr. Edwards, I see your hand.
Thank you. And I echo the same thing that Dr. Richard and Srinivasa have been talking about, and I hope Monica really hears us. I think the elephant in the room is trust. And we've been, all along, we've been real clear and have been trying to be respectful that there is a lack of trust here, and there's not going to be any trust until it's proven that we can trust you. And so that has to be open, because as soon as something goes sideways, if it's not immediately corrected, then we're right back where we started. And we already have enough mistrust. We don't need anything to support that. We need evidence that you can be trusted and that the community is going to be respected and valued. And that's the critical piece. And until that happens, unless it happens, then we're going to continue to have problems down the road. So just wanted to be clear about that.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. And, if I might, I think this is a great place for us as we are working alongside with the urban design team and we're having more opportunity to engage on some different levels. There may be some opportunities here, Monica and the project team, for us to spend some additional time with the community with these. Excuse the plane going overhead. There might be some opportunities for us to spend some additional time for those who have capacity to really help us drill down into those things. I see a comment from Mr. Modica in the chat in regards to that education and informing ODOT. Absolutely, I think that is key. He shared that there are elders, there's documentation, there are community leaders who would be thrilled to share that information, and that would be able to help educate in a way that would be very beneficial for this project and for future projects going forward. Mr. Modica, I saw you unmute.
Yeah, so I think it's important, to distinguish between educate and inform, right? There are many people who need to be informed. You aren't necessarily going to educate them because they don't want to hear it. But, once you inform, and if the leadership at ODOT acknowledges, hey, this information came forward, and really assign the task to include a signature that you attended and that you comprehended what was shared with you, would be most important.
That sounds like an amazing opportunity. I'll work with you, Erica, and see what we can put together.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts? I see your hand, Mr. Washington. I'll need you to unmute so we can hear you.
I keep listening to the qualitative and the certainty, but of information dissemination and the interactive communication between the two structures, or the two units, or the two groups. But when we started this process out, there was a lot of uncertainty in the process, and especially the uncertainty that comes around what some of this justice was going to be looking like and how it forms. And it was made clear that ODOT, they didn't do that. They didn't understand that aspect of things. But when I see the structure being formed, I see a whole lot of definitive, but no allowances for innovation and experiential reality. And over the years, as being a trainer, and a facilitator, the whole reality is that there is a space for innovation and experiential process. So if we eliminate that out of this process and just try to somehow or another arrive at certainty or specifics or quantifiable, it sort of takes away that opportunity for us to have some ability to create and emote towards some of the things that we're going to need to be innovative about. And so I don't know, for whatever that can work in this process, just the idea is just to know that we need room for innovation and experiential reality.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. Appreciate that. Other thoughts for Monica and the team? I know you might have continued thoughts. Mr. Richard, I see you unmuted.
Miss Erica, thank you so much. The other thing I want to emphasize, perhaps say it in a different way, when we talk about the quantitative and qualitative, and the qualitative being the lived experience, I hope that the qualitative can hold equal weight with the quantitative. Okay. So for me, that's very, very important. So, you know, again, I know we're in an era where people really rely on data, but the narrative piece, I think, is going to be critical and crucial as we move along. And I just want to make sure that they're held in equal weight. So for example, this goes back to the comment, right? We're going to reach out to the community and get input from the community. And this is where I pick up on that discussion again, you know, inform versus input on it. But I just want to make for certain that the input, the lived experience, the qualitative narrative is held just as equal as the quantitative, and almost to a sacred level. Because as Mr. Modica said, we got folks that will contribute to this process and contribute to this project. I mean, I don't think we'll fall short in that area, but if the information is received by ODOT and there is a tendency or a propensity to gravitate more toward the quantitative than the qualitative, I don't think that'll do the process justice or the project justice. And I think it will move us away from that restorative justice piece. So for me, the qualitative narrative lived experience is explicitly tied to restorative justice, because I think it is within those stories that we're going to find what we need in order for this project to be beneficial to the community. Thank you so much. I yield back to Ms. Eric.
Thank you. Wow, powerful. Thank you. I appreciate that. For the Rose Quarter team, I thank you for listening, and I hope that we have more opportunity. I'll make sure to continue to take your thoughts. HAAB members, as you all have thoughts in regards to this, please shoot me an email. You can always text me or call, because I want to make sure that we are elevating these thoughts and concerns to the level that need to have action behind them. Ms. Natalie, if you could share the slides with me, I'd love for us to move deeper. We have some exciting things from our urban design team to share with you as we kind of got out of order, but thank you for your flexibility and your patience. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, James McGrath.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you for having me, HAAB members, board members. We're going to talk about a couple of things and then dive deep into some of the design work. So next slide, Natalie. The first is last week at this same time, 6 of your colleagues on the board joined us for a meeting that we've set up for at least the next 6 months and maybe in perpetuity. So we can dive deeper into the design work, into the project details, talk about them in depth, answer questions, collaborate. And we did so last week, and I think to great effect. I think you'll see evidence of some of the feedback that we heard in that meeting will show up in tonight's meeting in our abbreviated presentation of some design development and design ideas tonight. But before we move on from that, I would welcome any of the attendees from last Tuesday's meeting to share out with the board members your perception of that meeting, its value, your interest in continuing it, your welcoming of others on the HAAB to join it. I'll just leave it for board members.
Indeed. Are there those of you who are with us tonight who participated on Tuesday? Would love to get your feedback in regards to our first design collaboration forum. Bryson, Mr. Edwards, I know you all were there with us.
I thought we had some great discussion and some great input from the HAAB members. And I think the design team was listening and heard our issues and our concerns. And so we'll see today. And but I think it was a good meeting that we had last week.
Mr. Washington, I saw you on mute.
Yeah, I second that. I think it was a good informative meeting. I think we discussed a lot of categories, you know, around public safety and placement and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I think it was in-depth and informative. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they came up with.
Indeed. Thank you guys for your input. I really appreciate those who have capacity. It is open. I know there was initially just 6 who said they had the capacity, but as you have time, feel free to stop in with the design team. You're welcome. This is going to be an ongoing process of collaboration. So I'll turn it back to James.
Yep, I'll just reiterate that and say for those informal meetings, the Design Collaboration Forum, there is no agenda other than the agenda that you bring to it. We are trying to be as transparent as we can with the explorations and the information that we have. So it is truly an office hours approach. If you've got something you want to discuss, we will have information. We'll have as much work in progress as we have available to ourselves, but it really is an opportunity to touch base more frequently and for us to listen and to listen fully. So next slide. Tonight, we're going to reprise some of what we talked about with that group, your colleagues last Tuesday. We've made some progress, it's only been a week. We're going to focus on 2 of the 4 categories that we've been talking about all along. And in fact, we'll talk about the sides and the undersides as opposed to the streets. And to do that, I'm going to move to a different technology platform. We're going to move out of the presentation. We're going to move into a sort of a virtual whiteboard space. And my colleagues on the urban design team, Marianne Zarkin and Bill Hart, are going to help me talk through the project topics with you. So if you bear with me, I will share my screen. Erica, can I prevail on you? Can you see the screen?
I cannot. I can see James McGrath is sharing.
Okay. Let's try it again. Let's share screen 3. Is that any better?
Bingo. Yeah. Beautiful.
All right. Okay. So it's hard to multitask and look at you and look at the screen, but I will endeavor to do my best. What we have in front of you now is a large map of the project up here in the upper left. We're going to talk about 3 things tonight. We'll talk about ideas that are emerging and that we are exploring around the underside of the highway infrastructure at Russell Street. We're going to talk about the walls on the project and ideas that we have for the highway face of those walls, as well as the community face of those walls. And then we'll get into a third area that's rich with opportunity for innovation and expression. It is down by the Rose Quarter Transit Center, but it includes bridges and columns and walls and plaza environments. So we've grouped those together and we'll talk about those third. At any point, please interrupt. This is intended to reprise a sort of dialogue and collaboration, much more than it is standing and delivering and presenting ideas at you. We really are trying in everything that we do to create dialogue. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marianne, and we're going to dive into the Russell area, if my computer cooperates. This is a sequence of images, both existing and proposed, around the Russell Street corridor. Here we are in terms of you know it well, and you know very much what it looks like today. And I think Marianne's going to talk about a sequence of ideas. And Marianne, you can tell me where you'd like to go on the Miro board as much as you present this work.
Okay, that's great. And if you raise your hand and I don't see it, just feel free to interrupt me, or Erica, let me know. Looking at this photo that's kind of in the middle of the screen shows you what it looks like right now. the underside of the freeway. And what it provides us is an opportunity for reclaiming this space and creating a space for public use and public activities and for placemaking and for hopefully creating a hub for activities and for people to connect. And it's something that's going on in a lot of cities, a lot of urban places across the country and across the world where people are reclaiming these areas that have been just kind of misused or ignored. So there's a lot of opportunities, as mentioned. One of the things that we discussed last week was lighting, both for an opportunity for artistic expression, but also for safety and for feelings of safety when you're underground. And so, James, you could zoom in. There's some photos here. Some of these are from Birmingham, Alabama, on the bottom right. I've visited Birmingham and walked through this area, and it's really cool. So it kind of creates a place just with the lighting. It makes you feel safe. It attracts people because you want to go check it out. So there's a lot of opportunities in that place, in that way. We've also looked at, as you can see, the area, and if you've experienced, is very, very sloped. We would have to create different platforms with a series of walls. And you can see in this section, you can see how much great change there is across the site. And this is just kind of one attempt at looking at how we might use the space. On the right-hand side of this section, you can see that there's not as much headroom. There's about 14 feet, so it would be tough to play basketball in there, but it might create a great place to have a partially covered and partially uncovered skateboard area. And then as we move to the left, and I'm going to show you a plan, James will show you in a minute down below, we've created kind of a central spine of this area that would connect spaces. So this is just kind of like a really rough look at what could we do with this space. And what we've done is try to create, as I mentioned, a central spine that would be like a meeting space, and it would kind of connect the different spaces along there. The green spaces are areas that would become places that could be activities. That could be like a sport court, that could be a futsal court, it could be a food cart pod, it could be a pop-up space for stores, it could be a children's play area, it could be a Portland Loo. And then on the right we have a skateboard area. Here's some activities. It could be a climbing wall. From just other examples throughout the world and throughout North America. The bottom section, elevation to our right, shows what the south side of the street could be, so that we kind of tie the spaces together and still kind of create a nice space to walk through. We looked at possible treatments on the right that could be columns and other activities. Just back to some of the activities that we talked about at our meeting last week was, it could be, in addition to these active things, it could be a farmer's market. It could be a weekend flea market. We could have, community gathering places. We could have, as I mentioned, pop-up stores and all of that. The walls and other structure that are included in here provide a whole canvas for artwork. I think we have an image there of a chalkboard wall. This is also in Birmingham, Alabama. Underneath their bridge, there is an amazing art piece that's a chalkboard wall. An artist has written, "Before I die," and then there's a line, and people have written in the most amazing things. It's incredible to visit. And so I'm going to, at this point, open it up to Bill to talk a little bit about the columns and the kind of some of the imagery and decorations that we discussed at last week's meeting.
Maybe before we dive into that, I want to acknowledge two pieces of feedback we got specific to Russell last week, where maybe active space isn't the only and the best use. What can we do for wealth creation in this place? And so the urban design team is going to go back and try to explore the creation of conditioned commercial space or other kinds of spaces. We haven't had, in the intervening week, we hadn't had time to do that. So that is one comment and one thing that we are going to continue to explore. And we have some questions about that. And the other is, we heard, paint wears off. And so please look at treatments that aren't just murals, I will say in this part of the project, there is a lot of existing infrastructure. So there's things that we can attach to that infrastructure, but there might be things that we can only do with a light touch. And so paint might be an appropriate thing in some parts of the project, but we hear you. And in other parts of the project, we want to do things that are more permanent, steel and concrete and things like that. So Bill, go ahead.
We talked about educational space as well.
Mhm. Yes, I forgot to mention that. We did discuss how, and I think that both the columns and the walls provide opportunities for historical interpretive displays. And Bill, go for it.
Yeah. Thanks, Marianne.
So you said it's okay, we can jump in real quick, make a comment?
Yes, you can. Yep.
Okay, I'm thinking two things. The first thing that pops up in my mind is looking at these photos, and I appreciate y'all have curated it from different places around the world. I'm thinking about Portland in context with the crisis around housing that we experience. I can't think of a single bridge under area that is not currently being temporary or permanent sheltering for folks who are part of the houseless community. So what I'm wondering is, how have you thought about that into long-term design? Who are the advocates from the houseless community that you're working with to think about these? Because all these pictures look great. I've traveled all across this globe and I've never seen an under area that maintains its vision, that does not become a place where, you know, houselessness happens, you know, or crime happens. And for me personally, thinking about elders in my family, in my community, I can't picture myself taking my mother or grandmother to the underbridge to go to a community event. Like, that's not going to happen. So the last thing I wanted to ask too is just about, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, so but my question just about the houselessness and thinking about that informing design.
Mm-hmm.
That is a great question. And we haven't been talking to advocates of the houseless population. We've mostly been talking with you all. And I think that's an important discussion. We touched on this briefly once before in a HAAB meeting, and there was dialogue around, we need to be creating beautiful places for forever, and that will become beloved and become programmed and welcoming. And not, my understanding of that dialogue was not design places so that they're against the houseless population, but design them for the community members who want to enjoy those spaces. So we've not worked with the houseless population to create safe settlement areas or things like that. We've been trying to take that long view. And I think what you say about bringing your own family there has to be acknowledged, because it will take partnerships to program and love this space so that it becomes the counterbalance to that. I don't want to go there. Well, we're hoping that you are supportive and interested in creating a place where people will love to go there. We need your help to get there, but that's sort of the germ of the idea. Can we reclaim this space and do something powerful with it? And we know how to, do the grading and move the dirt so it's flat and you can do things, but we're certainly going to need more ideas about what to do, what really is going to drive multi-generational activity there, what really is going to make people come.
Yeah,
I think we really
remembered. Sorry, let me just finish my last thought. I remember what it was. It's about the accessibility of the location too. So I think there's two key communities that I believe, are not represented in our group. And so thinking about whose voices are absent right now, it's the houseless community and it's people who are differently abled. So I think those are two key groups that we want to integrate into the informing process of the design.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I would add to what James had said is, I think those are conversations that we have been kind of looking for. We don't want to, again, these are initially concepts for us that we are trying to present to you to explore ideas, but we need voices in the dialogue, just as you talked about, to participate in this, to help us make sure this is an attractive, encouraging place that people want to go to.
I mean, does the larger HAAB group have thoughts about what would attract multi-generations to this? Some combination of youth and elders? Are we barking up the wrong tree? Is it forever going to be a forgotten space and a leftover space because it's under the bridge? I mean, that's what we're trying to test and explore here. You asked us to reach. We're interested in exploring. Okay.
I see Mr. Edwards has to leave the meeting, but I will just report back. I know that we've had this conversation prior and that almost unanimously HAAB members were saying, let's explore, let's do something innovative and creative. I think what you're hearing is just in-depth thought and wanting to make sure that we explore all of those areas so that every member of our community is able to benefit and participate in this.
Yep. And we know, Srinivasa, we know that we need more collaborators. And so we're working towards that. We're trying to frame up some of these things to identify opportunities, specific opportunities to enrich our team and enrich our outcomes with other collaborators.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to, if someone either listening in on this call knows this information or not, but of these bridge under areas that have been designed and used for many, many years since, you know, industrialization, there's got to be data out there as to what happens long-term usage. So I think I would love to know that if 80% or more or less of underbridge spaces end up being underused spaces, then we need to think about why and how is this project going to look at it differently? Is it really going to be different, or do we need to plan for how it will end up being used? But if anybody knows how to find that data, I'd love to know.
Yeah.
Well, we know that Bill was down in Eugene, and they have put in quite an extensive skateboard area down there. So we could probably try to reach out to some folks in Eugene to find out what their experience has been.
Yeah, and their location is a very active, very, very visible space where traffic on both sides. I mean, I think there's traffic on all four sides of the area that they've got designated for a basketball and a skate park. Complete visibility. So our side is much more challenging, harder. I think a little harder to get to. I think the visibility, per se, of the natural streets that we have right now don't put as many eyes on it as they do in Eugene. But again, it's an opportunity for us to kind of explore what could happen here.
Well, the one exciting thing is that there's more than just one site, so there's some versatility in these sites. Some could have housing, some could have basketball, some could have skate parks, some could have business and commerce. You shouldn't just get stumped because, someone asks or inquires about what's not on the table. There's a lot of things on the table. And the other suggestion is Jumptown, as I've suggested before, Larry Miller and the Blazers and all those people had a real complex and comprehensive design for under freeway, utilizing the under the freeway near the Rose Quarter. And so there's a lot of information that's still out there with those organizations, including the Blazers, who have some of that information and for the design work, because I did remember reviewing some of the design work that Larry and them had for Jumptown, and it had a lot of the freeways, utilization of the freeways. And the other thing is that, we talked a little bit about security also, about the importance of public safety in these spaces, because I do believe that there is some research and stuff out there that talk about crime and under freeways and all that kind of stuff. So I think all of that stuff would be really beneficial that we pull into our purview and able to review and take a look at before we make any major decisions as to what we want to put underneath these things.
And John, I'll just acknowledge we have gone on the hunt, including on the public side and on the private side, for information related to Jumptown. And I even have it in this board, everything that's publicly available we have found. So if there is a way that we can find some of the unpublished work or the more privately held work, we'd welcome that.
Mr. Miller.
Yep.
He would have it.
There's a comment in the chat from Mr. Modica saying there's also examples north in Seattle, Freeway Park and at Westlake Square that could give us some information in regards to what we want to do.
Yep.
I'd love to jump to Bill as we kind of stick with our timing.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about walls. James, you want to go out and talk about the locations of the walls that we have?
I will, if my computer would
go the other way.
Yeah, so it's a long, thin project. We've talked about this before. This drawing here, the big, what we call a roll plot, which tries to show a long infrastructure project on a single drawing. The roll plot, I've highlighted the major walls in yellow on that drawing, so you can see them here. I'm afraid if I zoom in, I'll stall again.
Sure.
There's a major wall that is essentially underneath the Harriet Tubman Middle School and faces the highway. There are going to be the walls that frame the portal into and out of the tunnel. We'll call it the tunnel. It's under the highway covers. And then there's a sequence of walls at the south end that we'll talk about tonight. But the important part of this is to know that it's something like 5,000 lineal feet of wall surface on the project. And some of those walls, many of them, have two faces, a highway face and a community face. And they don't have to be the same. They can have different treatments. And this is a simple rendering of, there's a wall that's facing the highway down here, and then there's a wall up above, a sound wall, that has a highway face, but it also will have a face towards Harriet Tubman Middle School. And we'll find a number of those. And so that's what Bill's going to talk about, is how do we make better walls? How do we make walls that look good and express something about this community from to highway users? And how do we make good walls that face the community as well?
So at the last meeting, we had presented a couple different themes, and we were trying to find some themes that we could kind of use to define the work that we had done. And with the Design Collaboration Forum, we kind of, presented a couple themes. One was the Pacific Northwest, where we were looking at images of the Pacific Northwest. We then looked at some heritage design schemes, which essentially were kind of based off African designs and traditional designs, and kind of used those. We also kind of looked at maybe cultural patterns, issues of maybe mud cloth or weavings or textures. And again, it's at this point, we're just looking for themes. We're looking for ideas. We're looking for something to stimulate a conversation with the HAAB to kind of tell us, are we moving in the right direction? Or should we be looking in a different direction? I know some of the designs here could be dated, so there might be more contemporary designs that are out there. And I think one of the things that we have talked about, and James may talk about a little bit later, is some sort of, there's an awful lot of opportunity for art and artwork and design on this project. And what we are showing here is that on these walls, there are opportunities as, almost like a blank canvas, that we can take sections of these walls and use them and identify, represent images of the Albina community, legends of Albina, the history of Albina, and of the African-American culture, and use those on these walls. So let's see, off to the right, you'll see here. So what I did is I took a look at, we've got long sections of walls, and the question was, how do we focus those walls and focus our energy? Do we have a small sections of, maybe in this particular case, maybe 3 sections that are kind of maybe have a couple different images or combined images, and then they're spaced apart by base blank panels that we then come back and alternately bring in other, repeat our image over again. It could be with 3 panels. I went down and looked at maybe an issue of maybe 7 panels, maybe 9 panels, maybe 11 panels. But the idea is to maybe we could use your help to try to figure out, how often do we represent and make these areas special areas when you've got a long wall? It can't be everywhere, but it can be in certain locations. And so we begin to kind of look at how do we do that with both some of the images I presented, but also future images and other things that we're kind of talking about.
So I would just interject to say, we heard resoundingly last Tuesday, stop talking about Pacific Northwest patterns. That we can see that anywhere in Oregon and Seattle and wherever. This is Albina. This is, let's make it Albina, and let the people who are driving by in trucks and cars know, and let's also enrich the experience of the community. I would say the walls that face the highway are, you all have experienced highway infrastructure. It can be coarse in its construction. It's not like building a house. It's like building a parking garage. It's just rough. And so the patterns that we choose should be, they can be refined, but they have to absorb a little bit of that roughness. And so we're thinking of creating, as Bill has described, areas of focus where we can have something special happen, but otherwise trying to have a simple pattern, a background pattern that allows the walls to be rough and have moments of specialness. And we promise to come back to you with specific wall drawings. At wall number 2, we could do this. At wall number 7, we could do this. But we're imagining that that's made out of concrete, much like the wall itself is likely to be made out of concrete. I think on the community side, there's a lot more we should talk about, because again, what we heard last Tuesday was, on the community face, there's a multiplicity of things we can do, but paint isn't good enough. Paint wears off. We were excited about a mural program, maybe up by the school in particular, but maybe there's more that we can do there. And so in terms of that, there will be a few walls where we can do something with landscape, a vertical thing that essentially tries to make that wall disappear. And we'll have that opportunity selectively on the project. We were talking about doing murals, and that would be a separate commission, a separate program, right? We'd build the wall, but others would make the mural. We would simply just set the table for that to occur. But there are other ways to make better walls, and the idea of applying something with more permanence, like a steel panel or an enamel panel or some sort of more permanent display of color, is also a possibility. And I think we're interested. Are murals truly not of interest to the team? Do we want to explore a combination of murals in some places and some more permanent types of art commissions in other places? We're interested to hear from you. When we think of the project, the major community-facing walls will be around Harriet Tubman Middle School, and then a collection of walls that we'll talk about next down by the Rose Quarter Transit Center. So thoughts on this area of consideration?
Well, let me just share something with you real quick about that. There's a lot of opportunity in creative concrete these days. I mean, they're doing some really fascinating things with it. I mean, when I was in New Mexico, they had lizards and turtles and everything on the walls. And I'm not talking about just short runs. I'm talking about long runs. Just a question that I'm having for you is, how have you taken into consideration the graffiti issue in Portland and these larger walls? And, you know, Lord knows someone would probably get rich if they can just design something that spray paint just won't stick to, you know. But I think that we're going to have some consideration with that too. Whatever we create as a project and an art, we have to continue to keep that in mind, especially on these large blank spans of wall. But I really would continue to encourage you to look at what this creative concrete stamping and coloring and all that stuff is, and bring that back. I'd certainly like to see more about that.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
so, yeah.
James, do we have any columns on the left that talk a little bit more about the idea of a round shell or a screen? Or
yeah, absolutely. We've got a number of images over here.
Yeah.
That we can pivot to. So we'll talk about this in the context of bridge and the edge of the bridge, but there really are some tremendously beautiful ways to do precision cut metal work that we thought we could enrich these walls with an attachment that came later. And it would be a series of metal panels, precision cut, get really beautiful. That could be, as Bill said, heritage patterns, historic patterns, or contemporary expressions. There's really no end to what laser cutting can do these days. And so we thought that was a potentially effective way to occupy space on the walls, but not just with paint, with something a little bit more permanent. John, we hear you about concrete can do wonders too, and we think that's appropriate on the highway side, where we don't want to attach anything to the walls. But we thought we might explore doing something a little bit nicer in terms of fit and finish, where it's closer to people.
A little bit more detail. Yeah.
Is this what you needed, Bill?
Yeah, yeah. And then I think we also have again, sound walls, and these are sound walls that are be on top of the bridge. And some of those, we're looking at ideas of those being transparent. The idea of opening those up so that that there is some visibility as people are driving by. Off to the left is an example of one scheme that we had kind of seen, and those screens down below. I think there might be something off to the right.
Yeah. We can tackle that wall next. Srinivasa, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I love the images of the living walls. I think bringing in greenery and life on the side that's near the school is key. And I wonder about innovative ideas like, can you have a native plant garden that's vertical? Can you have food that's growing vertically that, like, is it even safe to eat when it's that close to a freeway? But how can what's grown be useful? And then in terms of the opportunity providing, some of the wall space that you can't have plantings, but you can have other things on it. For me, I love murals. I think they're awesome to check out murals, but it's stagnant art. It's there and it's there permanently. So I think if there's an opportunity to attach something that can be changed out, so there's a rotating art display or something that, can provide an educational component or a community engagement component that every year or that marks a certain date or a time that's important for the albino community, then perhaps that's where the art can be rotated, and then school children and other folks can have a reason to come down there and view it again.
Yes.
Great. I think the other thing that we are looking at was the ideas of some of these columns could be lighted, and there's opportunity for lighting both for the undersides, but also for the columns themselves, and as well as some of the mosaic work opportunities along the columns where you could get kids involved. So I think the idea as we were looking at opportunities for art is let's look at a range of different options about skilled artists and the community to do it as more of a volunteer effort, but there might also be something with youth involved where they can get involved as well. So there's kind of a variety of different things and opportunities, which we're still now trying to identify even further than we are right now.
Yeah. And all of this comes together, even Srinivasa, your idea about rotating art, it comes together in an area that is sort of simple from the perspective of the infrastructure project, but rich with opportunities to make this infrastructure better. And so I'm going to jump, and Bill's already been sort of leading us there. I want to jump to the area of the project that is down by the Rose Quarter Transit Center. And we created a new drawing to help kind of explain the complexity of opportunities that are here. And I'm sorry that this hops around a little bit. So this is a very simplistic diagram of the project area. Essentially, 2 new bridges are being built as outriggers to the existing highway infrastructure. And so those bridges need columns to stand them up. We're going to talk about that, those 6 to 12 columns as an opportunity. And Bill was alluding to that. We're going to talk about the areas underneath Multnomah and the Rose Quarter as well. We're going to talk about the face of the bridge on the west side, where there is no sound wall, But there's an opportunity to decorate and enhance that entire length of bridge. And then there's some key walls on the west side, including this wall here, but that runs from Holiday Street to Oregon Street and is very conspicuous. We'll talk about that. And then there are walls that face the Oregon Convention Center on the east side, and the hospital and the housing on the east side, the new Convention Center Hotel. And there's also a lightweight sound wall that's up on the structure facing the east side. We'll talk about that. So this is sort of a key map to show you there's lots of things going on here. Let's start, Bill, with the idea. We've been talking about that long bridge. There's 6 columns in that bridge, and we had talked about, well, we could sort of reface the face of that bridge with a commission for pattern making, steel cut pattern making. We can't hang things that are too heavy off the bridge, but we do think we can create panels that we would hang off the bridge like this. But there are also 6 columns on the west side, 6 columns on the east side. And we have an idea, or Bill's starting to think about an idea that he's eager to share with you around how we develop those columns.
Thanks, James. As we started out, started out on this project looking at this, one of the things that came to me was the concept, and especially looking at the pillars, was the pillars of Albina. And it was the idea of whether we could use these 12 new columns that'll be put in with these new improvements, and begin to identify maybe 12 pillars of the community that we could identify and consider and address each of these columns with that individual. It could be history, it could be about the shipyard workers, it could be individuals in our community now, it could be people that have been involved in arts and entertainment. It could be somebody involved in food. It could be someone involved in education. Anyone, and again, we're not picking out who those individuals are, but the idea is let's use these pillars as an opportunity to pay tribute to folks that have come before us, and to maybe to those that are here now about who is changing the shape of the Albina community as we move forward. So this was one of the thoughts that we kind of talked about, and these are a few examples that James has here of just about how we could identify some of these columns and dress these up.
And we think that the columns are going to be plain and simple when installed, but again, we would wrap them in, maybe it's a metal cladding, we don't quite know yet. And that cladding, while we would design the connection to the column, that would be a separate commission to design the 12 pillars of Albina, to both sort of do the research, run the process, but then ultimately make the imagery, the text, and all of that stuff. We think a metal enclosure that someone else would put the art and the medium on, but we would provide the infrastructure, the column, the connections, and maybe even some backlighting and illumination. We look at the 12 columns in this area as a standalone sort of special investment area. Any thoughts about that?
No thoughts from HAAB members?
I have some.
Yes, Mr. Modica.
I like the idea. I like the thought of interchangeable commissions. And I wonder how much technology can be utilized. Flat panel and, what do they call it? Light stenciling. How much of that is even conceivable, right? Because we all have to share this. And one thing I haven't heard is that, quite frankly, all of this land was indigenous land before different groupings of non-whites were pushed into the space and given the opportunity to make place. So, we say 12 pillars of Albina, that's great, but we have an obligation, I think, as a community to not only be inclusive, but intentionally be inclusive. That's just some of my thoughts.
That's a great comment, Kevin. I think we do need to, it seems to me we do need to pay tribute to cultures before us as well.
Regarding technology, light, and projection, I think we're very interested in light as a medium, uniting all of these underspaces. It's so critical to the perception of safety and the reality of safety. In terms of flat screens and things like that, I think what we run up against in public art and public infrastructure projects is maintenance, upkeep, replacement. But that's certainly the multimedia display should be part of the call for artists. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was thinking, on the simplistic end, if you use light stencils, right, you'd only have to have something to insert in the uplighting cylinder, sure, as opposed to the heavy cost and burden of maintenance for LED, LCD, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, so I think what we're hearing about the bridge deck edge and the columns is something akin to keep going. Show us more, get specific. Let's talk about the two areas underneath the highway, and then we'll talk about the special wall, and then I think Erica's going to tell us to get off stage. So there are two in this area. There's an overcrossing of Multnomah, and this is a place, John, where we're really interested in what Jumptown has explored and done before. At the Rose Quarter Transit Center, I think our idea is relatively simple. It's to tidy the place up, maybe paint the place, and we have this idea that there's a space between the back of the light rail platform and the face of the TriMet trolley barn, which is a maintenance facility, that we could repurpose and reclaim for commercial activity. Here we're using the language of food carts, but we've been asked to look at something a little bit more substantive and permanent. But the idea would be to create a space that was a little bit more delightful to occupy as you were waiting for transit, maybe as part of an event or after event, maybe as something in the convention center or the Moda Center. I mean, you are really on the spine of activity in the Lloyd District. And so could we make a place that was attractive and therefore drove wealth creation through commercial activity? That's the gist of the idea at the Rose Quarter Transit Center. Simple, but hopefully elegant. And then at Multnomah, it's primarily a street. It's mostly a street that undercrosses there, and it's a really important street for transportation purposes. It's got some work to do, but there are two sidewalks that we think we can improve and enrich, and we say sort of improve the hallway experience. And so we have an idea about a better floor, a better ceiling with lighting again, but also an idea of history writ large and making a better wall, particularly the wall. Either one of those walls is a candidate for something a little bit more beautiful and historic, telling an historic story. We think we can make a canvas on the south side and maybe even the north side, though a little bit more constrained. These are examples that ODOT's landscape architect shared with us from a project that he identified, and these are beautiful. And I think we're attracted to them because we'd make the whole hallway would be a better experience. Anything I missed there, Bill or Marianne, on Multnomah or the Rose Quarter?
I think back to the pictures, just to your right, where you're trying to create an experience, an attractive experience where folks are, I know it's a transit area, but the idea of having them have some experience, whether they're walking, riding a bike, or somehow going through an area that is enhanced with lighting and then provides maybe some educational opportunities with exhibits or other plaques or things in the wall that represents the history of Albina.
I was just going to say that the lighting becomes part of the experience. I mean, it both illuminates and makes you feel safe, but it also is maybe playful or artistic and interesting.
So Erica, I think we only have a moment to touch on it, but Bryson, you go ahead.
Yeah. So one thing about that route in particular, which is, the places where we're going to have the more foot traffic, we can really use to be more detailed if we wanted to talk about the history of the place, because it's going to be places where people are going to be much closer and they're going to be able to spend a little bit more time. And so I definitely think that can be an area where the history can be laid out along the wall.
Sure.
Use the people, places to tell the story. I like that. There are a couple of other big things going on down in this area. I know that we're running out of time, and there's some very good things to follow. So I will just say that there is a wall that is on top of the bridge. It's a sound wall that is there for sound mitigation purposes. And it could either be simple and plain, or a place that we could do something exciting. And we're obviously leaning towards exciting, and the HAAB that we met with, the members that we met with last week, were excited. We have an idea of doing a transparent, translucent rendition of a sound wall that will become a canvas that we can design together. So it could be a mosaic, it might have etching patterns. We're just at the beginning of the exploration, which includes, can we get it approved? Will it work? Is it functional? Does it perform seismically? And if that's a yes, then we have a whole bunch of design exercises that we can bring back to you. We could make the mosaic like this. It could say that. There could be a super graphic. So we're excited about it as a piece. Obviously, the idea of light. It's a north-south running wall, so it will have it will cast evening light into Holiday Street. It has the potential to be really playful and exciting, and certainly better than just another wall.
Wow.
So we're excited about that. There are some other big walls in this area, but we'll talk about them next time, because we're going to keep coming back, and we're going to get more and more specific with you. But I think that's probably enough for now.
Thanks, James. I want to make sure that we're capturing all of those great notes in the chat. I know that the team that helps with technical is going to make sure we have all those, but great suggestions, Ms. Modique. I appreciate that. I just want to encourage you. Thank you all for continuing to dive into this area. I think we have the potential to do something really, really awesome here and honor not only the history of Black albino, but I think it's great to think about an equitable approach and how we honor. Many of us are from Native heritage as well. And so I think that's an awesome input to this conversation. So for those of you who do have the capacity to continue to participate in those urban design workshop forums, please do so, because it is rich with information, and the collaborative energy is just flowing. So thank you to James, Bill, Marianne. We appreciate you and your openness to hearing what the community has to say. I'm really, really excited about our kind of final thing to hear this afternoon. And they're just really exciting. We heard from this group. I know that Mr. Edwards had to leave early, but some of this around how do we engage the next generation in this project? How do we collaboratively work with programs to involve youth in the engagement, in the design collaboration? And so we have been having some really great talks with Srinivasa and her colleagues at Camp Elso. And so we have a youth engagement opportunity that we would like to share with this board. And so let's see, am I turning it over to, who's running the slides for us? Miss Natalie or Srinivasa?
I have a copy that I can share if you prefer that, Srinivasa.
Yeah, so you have the most recent one. That'd be great, because I have my notes on this other one. So if I don't have to navigate, I can.
No problem. And there was a video on an old version. Erica, do you know if we're watching that first? YouTube video?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do that one first. And then
yes, please. Thank you, Ms. Natalie.
I have always loved science. I've always been curious. I love being outside and being in the natural world, but I couldn't quite find my place in science as a profession.
Thank you, Ms. Natalie. I was hoping we could enlarge the screen because I think we're seeing.
Okay, it looks distorted on your end too.
It doesn't look distorted. It just looks like a portion of of the desktop screen.
Okay. Sorry about that. Let me try to resolve that.
No worries. Dr. Holt always says technology is amazing when it works.
That is the truth.
Thanks for your patience.
I love being outside and being in the natural world, but I couldn't quite find my place in science as a profession. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. All through middle school, high school, and even into the beginning of college, I thought I was going to go into healthcare, but that didn't quite work out for me. I still wanted to do something for my community. I wanted to do something that bridged my passion for learning, for science education and youth. So I created this role for myself. My name is Srinivasa Brown. I'm the co-founder and executive director of ELSO Inc. Experience Life Science Outdoors. As executive director of ELSO, I work with communities. I design programs to get Black and Brown youth and young adults engaged in STEAM learning. That's science, technology, engineering, arts, math, environment, and design. There are so many contributions that Black folks have made to science and to STEAM. For me, it's really the current people, current scientists and entrepreneurs that inspire me the most. People like our co-founder, Dr. Kellyanne Richardson, and Dr. Joanne Cornwall, who created the sister lock techniques. They're both inspirational because they are Black women. They are moms and entrepreneurs and creators, and that inspires me because they're solving real world problems. They are setting an example for more women of color. And while it's Black History Month and it's great to look back at the historical figures that helped get us to where we are now, it's important that we recognize and call attention to all the ways that the Black community and Black excellence is enriching science and environmental education right now. The advice that I would give to a young person is to go out and find mentors that are a few steps ahead of you. People that you can keep in your circle, that you can ask questions, learn from them, and really watch them and observe what they're doing, learn from their mistakes. You are going to fall, make mistakes, have stumbling blocks, and as long as you sit in a place of being constantly learning and constantly improving yourself, you're gonna be okay.
Just one moment while I pull up Srinivasa's presentation here.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't think I realized we were going to watch that video, but that's awesome. I think it gives everybody on HAAB a little bit more about my background, which I'm not going to go into too much because I want to share a little bit more about ELSO. As I mentioned in the video, ELSO stands for Experience Life Science Outdoors. Next slide, please. And our mission is to teach and frame STEAM and nature-based education through a lens that centers and elevates stories, ways of knowing, individual needs, and lived experience of Black and Brown communities. Next slide. So I just want to share briefly kind of where we started from and where we are now, because it's been a whirlwind of the last 6 years, but we are homegrown in Portland. Portland-based and growing beyond. We started in 2015 with 4 volunteers and 16 kindergarten through 2nd graders. Now we have 4 programs that's serving youth through young adults, kindergarten up to age 22. We have touch points in 5 states, that's in person in Oregon, virtual in other states, and we're within 6 different Oregon school districts. And in total, about every year we serve about 600 students, that's young adults, youth, and their families. We've had to adapt with COVID as all of us have. And so we began giving mutual aid in 2020 and 2021. And it's something we hope to continue to do, is show up to support families, their full needs and whatever that looks like as we continue to provide STEAM education. Next slide. So this is a important slide because it has information on how we work. And I think this is really crucial to understanding why ELSO is interested and willing to come to the table to work on this project. And I share this with you all because ELSO, we think of ourselves as a JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion focused organization. These are the definitions that we use and have adopted for what they mean to us. And so I wanted to pose a few questions for my fellow HAAB members to reflect on internally and to keep front of mind as we engage in this project with ODOT. So what resonates with you about this definition of justice? How do we and how do you apply a justice lens to the work we are doing? How do we seek justice when justice is challenging? And in this project, there's multiple layers of challenge, right? And in the ways that we show up, how are we looking at our process in addition to outcomes? How do we engage folks so that their experience matters? So you can see that 3 pieces of how we do our work is a community development lens, a process versus outcome lens. So really thinking about how we get there, adjusting the course if we need to in order to be mindful to new information and to what's important as our values continue to be influenced by community and by who we serve, and experience, lived experience. I think we spoke to it, who was it? Was it Dr. Richards earlier talked about the rich and the importance of qualitative information and how we need to hold that in high regard. And we try to do that internally within our organization as well. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we have 4 camps. We are 4 programs. We have a day camp called Wayfinders. It's an affinity space for Black and Brown youth. They go on STEAM-based field trips across the Pacific Northwest. It's an out of school time camp, so it happens in spring break and during the summer. There's 4 weeks. We also have a culturally specific internship called Tappin' Roots. This program is collaborative in that we have 5 partners that work together to provide summer work, to create the career symposiums and leadership development opportunities for the 20 Black young adults who are selected to participate in this year-long internship. And Your Street, Your Voice, and Empower Her, which I'll spend a little bit more time talking about, are our newest programs that serve about 175 youth annually in cohorts. And these cohorts are focused on design as a tool for social and racial justice, which is what we're hoping to bring to this project. It's a collaborative program in that it depends on partner organizations to be successful and to exist. And Lab Life, which is not a program, but it's a subscription box that was created by our scientist and co-founder, Dr. Kellyanne Richardson, with the input of our kids and families and educators. And it's a curated subscription box that elevates the stories of Black and Brown cultural history in science in a hands-on way. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to share with you who we are and some of our different teams. So our Your Street, Your Voice team is led by Jackie Santa Lucia, who is on this call tonight. I don't know if she can even introduce herself or how that works, but or even turn her camera on, but Jackie's on the call. There she is. Hi, Jackie. And next slide. Thank you. So Your Street, Your Voice is a paid learning opportunity that introduces the AECD fields and the design process to Black, Brown, POC, Indigenous, and LGBTQ+ youth through project-based learning with industry professionals who are their mentors. So we teach design and construction as tools for racial justice, and we make connections between the built environment with social and racial justice. Next slide. So these are some key pieces of how we teach. I think it's important to know the frameworks that build up a foundation of a program. Green lens, trauma-informed principles, design as protest demands, the Black Space Manifesto, and critical race theory are all the 5 frameworks that represent the foundation of our Your Street, Your Voice program. Next slide. If you are, if these are new concepts or new ideas to you all, I highly encourage you to check out the Black Space Manifesto and the design as protest, because I think these are some key things that we can pull in some information to help inform this project and our education that we want to make sure that ODOT receives as they are engaging in the design. Next slide, please. I just wanted to show you a visual representation of the organizations and community groups and mentors and leaders that come together that help make this project, this program, excuse me, successful. Then I want to transition, next slide, to mention our Wayfinders and Tap and Roots team led by Jamie, who's also on the call. Give her a little shout out as well. So in our hopes of working with HAAB on this project, both Jamie and Jackie and myself would be critical leaders in helping shape and pull in youth into having some voice in this design project. Next slide. So Tap and Roots, as I mentioned, is a culturally specific internship. Keep going, next slide, please. And the interns work with one of 5 organizations connecting Black and Brown youth to nature via experiential learning. So they guide outdoor excursions, they facilitate hands-on activities, they engage in conservation projects and environmental justice conversations. And during the school year, they participate in symposiums that look at career pathways in college prep. Next slide. So here's how you can find me, reach out to me, more information about ELSO. But now that I shared a little bit about us, I really want to spend the last of our time together talking about the project values and just hearing from HAAB about how ELSO can honor our goals, our charter, and our project values with engaging youth in design. So just to remind ourselves of these 3 kind of pieces that we're focused on, and really I think for ELSO, it's really critical, the restorative justice component, the climate action, since we are an environmental justice focused organization, and then in everything we do, bringing in community input on decision making. Next slide. So I would love to just open it up to conversation for the HAAB members who are present and for my team as well. We would like to know from you all, what are the priorities of the design phase? We just spent a good chunk of time going through with James and the design team and hearing about the different areas where we can have impact and think about. But my first question is, where would you like us to focus in terms of engaging youth and engaging intergenerationally, engaging the community in the design phase?
So Srinivasa, quickly, thank you. I want to just jump in, and I know that there may be a little bit of a disconnect from some HAAB members. So I wanted to allow James to jump in here. And I know you all heard from Tia earlier in regards to the community engagement. There are several levels to that in regards to the I-5 Rose Quarter project. I know also that Jeff and Bill and the CMGC team are also working on areas to engage the community. So James, if you would share a little bit about the conversations and the potential partnership for leveraging the Camp ELSO program and how this project can invest in our youth and utilize the youth engagement voice.
Happy to do so and do it briefly. We think there's 2 places where the project could really lean in and support the work that Camp ELSO does. The first is the Tap and Roots. There is a wealth of careers and folks who are working on this project. And if we could expose some of those careers to that year-long cohort, we're eager to do And that does range from the Jeff and the Bill, the construction side, through the design side, through the ownership side. There's just a ton that we could bring and make available to youth in that year-long cohort. And then on the design side, there's really endless opportunity. I think I want to honor, I don't want to frame those things. We've brainstormed already with the Camp Elso team. We think there's lots of support that we can provide, but I think they want to listen first and then choose focus areas with the HAAB. And I think that's the right way to do it. You heard what we talked about tonight at Russell, and we talked about what's going on at the Rose Quarter Transit Center. And we haven't talked for a while what's going on up on those covers, right? There's a plethora of places that the students would have a tremendous impact and could learn a tremendous amount. But I think Srinivasa and Jackie and the team, they're really interested in hearing from you about where to focus, because that will start this thing off on a sincere foundation.
Also, thank you so much, James. Want to reflect it. This potential collaboration and partnership came up as a result of previous HAAB conversations and wanting to make sure that there was an expansion into all areas of the community, and that we leveraged the youth involvement piece. So with our last moments, because I want to be conscious of our time, I don't want to short circuit Srinivasa and the conversation, but I think we can continue the conversation. If there are comments or input, I would love to open that up so the team can hear how we might further develop this engagement piece. And I can't see my full screen, but I know that a number of HAAB members were moving into another community meeting and stayed as long as they could. And so I don't want to short circuit this conversation at all. If there are other HAAB members who are here who would like to chime in, we'd love to hear from you.
So Erica and Srinivasa, definitely thank you. It's an awesome presentation. My question is, what about other youth-centered leadership opportunities in the community? You've got POIC, you've got Constructing Hope, we've got SEI, we've got myriad. You've got Airway Science, you've got iUrban Teen. So does this, and James, I haven't been a party to any of the conversation, does this become a reach out specifically just to this organization, which just seems really, really robust? Or is there going to be an extended hand to some of the other organizations that I mentioned?
I can definitely speak to that, Mr. Modica. I think how I'm seeing it is that we would help facilitate being a connector overall, but definitely not the one and only group. Part of the reason I shared about these two programs is they're open, one, for any youth, and there's no set participants as of yet, except for the internship. However, the opportunities for design workshops, we would facilitate, they'd be open to all youth. So what my hope is, and I kind of adjusted these questions because we didn't have a lot of time. My hope is to find out from HAAB members, what are the networks and communities you all are a part of, so that we can bring in those groups and those folks in addition to the organizations that we're connected with. Because as I shared in my presentation, we have youth that we serve directly, but our programs exist because of partnerships. And I think a lot of the organizations you mentioned, I've either been a part of or have connections to. So I'm 100% on board for thinking about getting it deep impact, deep voice of youth involved in this, but needing one group to be accountable and responsible for how it happens. And so I think that's kind of why I said, okay, I think we could do this. I'm on HAAB. I need some way to be engaged and involved. Why not the youth engagement portion? But I think it would be really helpful, Erica, in lieu of time is, and what I mentioned on one of the next steps is I would love some time for HAAB members and for ELSO just to connect and talk and outline what this looks like. Because circling back to what Mr. Edwards shared earlier, trust is really important. I think trust within our community, but also trust between any community organizations and ODOT. And right now, ELSO's at about a 50-50. So we're invested and we're working on building trust. We're coming to the table, but we also want to make sure that we're thinking about accountability, both for ourselves, but for external partners. So, so that's what my hope is that we can have some follow-up time, because only a small portion of our group is present. And I want to make sure that the information that gets out to the community is not that ELSO has been invited to be the youth engagement piece, but they've been invited to help facilitate some of the youth engagement opportunities.
I really appreciate that clarity. I mean, that just, that cleans the window so much for me. And we all know that we serve many of the same youth.
Yeah.
Simultaneously or separately, depending upon the need. But certainly I've heard you. I have heard you, and I hope that we have the opportunity to discuss even further what this looks like and how it operates. So thank you so much.
Yes, and I want to share as well that there are other folks on our team, Mira, who's not with us tonight, who's been working and having conversations with Dina at iUrban Teen. There's other outreach that is happening at the same time. So we definitely want to make sure that there is a wide reach and that those youth who are participating in programs across the city, that we're able to engage them and those that want to be a part. So there is an opportunity in some of our design collaboration forums. We could repurpose some of that time if that worked for HAAB members. It's on our calendar. We have that available. And maybe that's an opportunity, Srinivasa and team, where we can engage HAAB members on a more kind of informal but direct level to have specific conversations. January 11th is our next design collaboration forum. So maybe that's an opportunity. So I can try to help facilitate that offline and see where folks are with that. But I think this is an incredible opportunity for us to engage various generations in this project so that it will have a lasting impact for our community. Miss Natalie, will you share the slides for me? Srinivasa, thank you. I think what we need to do is collaborate offline, and we'll get a time together where we can have more voices and input for this important piece. Next slide, please. So again, as I just mentioned, those design collaboration forums, we can repurpose them for us, specifically for design, but this is a key component for us. So James, thank you for the offer for us to be able to repurpose that time together if need be. We're going to continue to have the conversation in regards to project performance measures, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to have some additional time outside of our scheduled meetings to dive deeper into what those outcomes look like. We're going to continue to talk through this design and highway infrastructure, local streets and the highway, and then need your impacts, your contribution to the community engagement and how we impact the community in this work. I want to say to you, this has been a wonderful 2021. I want to acknowledge that you all have participated in, I don't have the numbers, so don't quote me, but almost 20 meetings this year. And I really value your commitment, your passion for this community. And collaboratively together, we can do something awesome. Thank you for your investment. And since this is our last meeting together for December, I want to thank all of you for your time. Wish you a happy holidays. Pray for peace and that there's an opportunity to rest because there's lots of work to be done as we head into 2022. So with that, I will say good night to you. Please be on the lookout for emails. I would love to still connect with those one-on-one who have capacity to do so. But tonight, we'll say good night to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much, Mary Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart.